Osnat, Altstadter, Weitman, where she is staying with Mrs. Ben Ganauer in Seattle on September the 14th, 1976. Interviewer is Botnik Kaplan. Now, where did you come from in Poland?
A town called Zbarasz was a very lovely Jewish community where my parents officially belonged to, so far as belonging to a shul.
Now, was Poland divided into gubernias like Lithuania was, into states? How was the country divided?
This part of Poland was also Austria.
Oh.
And being there at such a tender age, I don't quite know the geography.
I see. How would you spell that town, the name of that town?
Z-B-A-R-A-Z.
Z.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was that a pretty good-sized town?
Yes.
Was it? It wouldn't have been called a shtetl. It would have been called a city.
Yes. It was near Tarnopol.
Near Tarnopol.
And a lot of the family lived in Tarnopol. And the two villages and the estate that belonged to the Altstatters was closest to Zbarasz.
There was a shul there.
Many shuls.
Many shuls, all Orthodox.
It was a ghetto community.
I see. You were born in that town.
I was born on the estate.
You were born. Now, how long had your, the estate, was it the estate of your father's parents or your mother's parents?
My father's parents, but his father died young, so the grandfather was there, Isaac Altstadter, and it really started with his father, Daniel Altstadter.
That would have been with your great-grandfather.
Who was a Russian immigrant, and he built this estate.
That's your great-grandfather on your father's side.
Yes.
And where did he come from in Russia?
I really don't know. He was one of these orphans captured in the army, not knowing that he was a Jew, and he was told later on that he was a Jew, and raised his whole family in a Jewish way.
How was he able to accumulate the wealth to have this estate, to possess this estate?
I don't know. A lot of hard industrial work.
How did he get did he buy the land?
Yes, they owned the land.
He bought.
This was 4 generations later that I came around, and that land belonged to them.
The land had been in the family for 4 generations.
Mm-hmm.
Where did your mother come from?
Lemberg. She came from a big city. She was a distant relative of my father. My father's uncle was married to her father's sister.
I see.
And in those days, they picked a shidduch. And when she was a little girl, and my grandfather came up to see his family in Lemberg, he said, "Save me that daughter for my boy." That's how it was.
And were they married in Lemberg?
No. They were married on the estate.
On the estate?
Yes.
What did they do on the estate? Did they have animals? They reared crops, raised crops?
Mm-hmm. They raised crops, wheats of all sorts, and they also had a place where they converted the wheat to liquor. They had many hundreds of horses and a lot of fruit and different grains.
What did they do with the horses? Did they sell them?
Means of transportation, because it was a very big area, and at least 300 laborers
so they had
on the place.
They had a whiskey factory.
They had that too.
Did they have a brand name for the whiskey?
I don't know.
Oh. Was it sent out all over Poland? Did they have a market for it all over Poland?
They had a market. There certainly was a big demand. And what they're proud of especially are the classes they gave to chalutzim, who trained before they left to Israel in all agrarian fields and ways and means of raising crops and cattle and fowl. This they had lectures and lecturers, and they were great agrarians.
I see. Have you kept in touch with any of those chalutzim that trained?
Definitely. In 1962, my father went to Israel, and he met very many of those chalutzim. Some of them were in government and Knesset, but they were all exceptionally proud to see him again after so many years. And they all said that the training they had at the Altstadter estate certainly was a big step in their livelihood in Eretz Yisrael.
Did any of them get famous or wealthy?
Yes, I wish I knew their names. My father could list off at least 3 members of the Knesset now, some of them women that went very far. They were very bright. Not only did they come for the agrarian education, the Altstatters had private tutors for their own family. These people profited educationally too. Literature, music, and...
They lived in your house? They lived in his house?
They had many houses on those estates, and there was plenty of room to house at least a group of 40 at a time.
Now, what?
We have pictures of classes.
Oh, you do?
That went around, yes, at home.
Now, what years would those have been? The years, the 20s? The thing that interests me is that these people were going to Palestine.
Well, before the 20s.
Before the 20s.
Yeah, the early 1900s.
Well, were any of those that first group, the Bilu boys, the Beis Hayankov, Lahu, the first Aliyah?
I really don't know.
I see. They went very early. And in those years, evidently, there was no difficulty in getting into Israel.
No.
No, you could, into Palestine, you could get in. So your mother and father were married, and what year, do you know what year they were married?
Let's see. That's,
Are you the oldest child?
No, I was the youngest for a long time, for 11 years until my brother was born. You know how... You can shut the tape and I'll figure it out.
And it's not good. We don't like to close off the tape.
1930. 1930 or 29.
29 or 30. What is your first memory of living on the estate? Did you lived in a house on the estate?
My memory would be cloudy, but the pictures we have substantiate everything. It was a beautiful house with the pillars, like the Roman pillars. It had many apartments, many families lived in it. It was like the central home. My parents didn't want to live there together with the whole family. When they got married, they just took a small house on the premises. And to be alone, they found the isolation very inviting, and this is what they wanted, but they lived there. And I was 2.5 years old when my father went to learn in the University of Berlin. And when he got his degree from there, it was 1939, the World's Fair in America, and the university had asked him to go to America to the World's Fair and distribute some of the new diesel machinery.
What was it customary for boys from these strictly Orthodox families to go to university, or was your grandfather rather avant-garde to have sent him?
The Altstatters all sported beards, my grandfather and my great-grandfather, and my father and his brother did too. But in order to get into university, they wouldn't accept him with the beard, and he went as far as to ask a rabbi what to do, and the rabbi said, shave the beard and go to the university. But the real reason why he went there was his father, who was a very rich man and a worldly man, traveled all over, came home with the idea that one of his sons should have a secular education in a field of science or math, because he said the new world to come, the generations ahead of us, will need people prepared with this background. And to be Orthodox and to be isolated is not enough to be among the people of the new generation. And he insisted that one of his sons should go to the university. So he shaved the beard and he went.
Did your mother stay with you children on the estate while he was in Berlin?
Yes, she thought that was not fair to be alone and left with the family, but she had a maid for every one of us children. I remember my maid more than I do my mother at the very early age. and she had tutoring in piano and in languages and sewing classes. So she was well taken care of, and she said when she thinks back to those years, she doesn't remember a day with a problem. Every day was paradise.
I see. So he took his degree in about 4 years?
Or less, because he was doing a lot. He was tutored privately all his life, so that he had the basics. All he needed is the specifics. So I don't think he attended all 4 years, but he has a beautiful diploma in German that he has used as recently as 1960, when he went to Troy, Ohio, to an engineering school. They gave him credit for that knowledge and that diploma that he had from Berlin. So instead of attending for the length of time he needed the American degree, he attended only 8 months, and he got a degree in welding engineering too.
Now, Hitler had been in power for 7 years by 1939. Were there no tendencies to be afraid, or was he not trepidatious about leaving his family? And
he was. He went to a Rebbe. We are Hasidim, Kipichnitz and Hasidim, and he went with the guidance of the Rebbe. At that time, many Jews didn't know what the right thing to do was, and the Rebbes, many of them stood in Europe simply because they wanted to be with their people in times of trouble. They didn't pick up to run away. But this Rebbe suggested that my father go. It's time for him to go. It'll be a good step. And maybe he'll come right back after the World's Fair. But that didn't happen.
now, had there been any manifestations of Nazism in where you lived, in the city or on the estate?
No, as far as 1939, we still had the estate, but shortly after, the Russians came in and they confiscated all the property.
After your father had left?
Yes, 2 months after.
After your father had left, the Russians came in and confiscated the property.
The property, and sent us to a ghetto in a town called Makilinitz, where we were herded together like cattle, all in a ghetto. I remember we were 12 families in the house. It was a large house, but it was still very crowded. There, daily life went on, shopping, a private tutor for the children, but my uncle and mother did not have a job to work, and they just lived off with whatever they took along from the estate.
Oh, they were allowed to take something, some money and some possessions?
Yes, very few, but enough to sustain us for a few years.
Oh, so you were in this town for several years in the ghetto?
No, we were there just a year and a half before the first pogrom, the Nazi pogrom.
In that town?
Yes.
And what happened? How did you know? How did the pogrom affect you? How did you first know about it?
Well, word came around that the Nazis are sweeping town after town, and they'll eventually come to our town too. So the Jews in the vicinity built bunkers in their bedrooms or outside, wherever they thought was the best place to hide. And we had a barn on the yard, and we informed the 12 families that we're going to be building a bunker in case the Nazis sweep our town. There'll be some place to hide, run for safety. And I was only 3 years old. I don't remember the building of it or the talk that went on in the families, but I know when I went in there, I knew it was a project of many. It was a nice-sized room and place to sit down, and food was stored, so that the Jews got together and they built this for their safety in case they needed.
Now, just a minute. First of all, by this time you were 3 children in the family. You and your sister and
my older brother, who was 9 years old. He's the oldest.
He was 9, and your sister was about 6, and you were 3?
Yes.
Uh-huh. And when you say bunker, do you mean like dug into the earth and camouflaged so it couldn't be seen? Was that what it was?
Precisely.
Like a cave dug in?
Yes.
I see.
Lifted part of the floor. And inside was a cave.
Oh, like they lifted part of the floor of the house?
Yes,
Oh.
of the barn.
Oh, of the barn.
It was safer
yes.
to do it in the barn.
I see. So you actually had a place under the floor of the barn?
Yes,
Yeah.
one flight down.
I see, under the floor of the
where
barn.
we could be lowered down. There was a person down in the bunker holding his arms up to the one who would help the other one come down and bounce on the floor. There were no steps or anything to come down.
How did you manage for sanitation?
It was all dark.
Did they rough in some sort of toilet facilities?
I don't think so. You know, just a pot.
Uh-huh.
But we didn't think it was a place to stay there more than 12 hours at a time. When the pogrom was over, Jews were allowed to go up and live freely until the next pogrom.
Now, how many pogroms? Do you remember actually going into that bunker?
Yes, it happened on a Friday night when we finished eating and went to sleep, and then we heard the siren. Most of us heard the siren, but none of us ran towards the bunker. We were all panic-stricken, not knowing what to do right from left. My uncle, who was the adult in the family and responsible for the family, my father's brother, who took care of his wife and baby, plus his mother, and she had an older sister with about 3 of their children, and my mother, my brother, my older sister, myself, and perhaps another few people in our immediate family. My uncle knew where the bunker is, and he suggested that we all run there when the whistle blew, and nobody listened. One would look at the other and panic-stricken, and yet we just wouldn't budge. So he grabbed his little daughter and myself in his arms, and he said, "I'm leaving. Whoever wants to follow me, you know where that bunker is, and you better hurry up before the Nazis come." Well, he left. I remember going down into this dark bunker, and I remember my uncle speaking to my brother of 9 years old, "Come on, go. Try to persuade them to come to the bunker. Your family, your neighbors, tell them where to go. And hopefully we'll see you all here soon, because this is where safety is." But it seemed forever. Nobody came. And after many hours, we did hear a knock at the door, and it was my mother and my sister. Those two had survived, hoping that they'd find the rest of the family in the bunker, but there was no one else there, and they were very disappointed. All my mother was able to tell us was the pogrom is not over yet, but she has just come out of the cellar in the house where she was hiding. She took my sister in her hands and walked down the cellar, and when the Nazis finished roaming the whole house, they punched the doors, the cellar doors, that fell on top of my mother and sister. And they ran through the cellar. They weren't able to see her because the door protected her. And when they left, she grabbed that little girl and ran towards the bunker. And that's all she was able to tell us. She didn't see anyone. The place was empty. Everyone was taken, killed, or alive. No one left. And we stood there for another 12 hours, and we did hear a siren that represented the sound of liberty. The pogrom was over.
Now, first of all, did you find any remains of any of those people that had been taken? Did you hear about them? What did you find out? They were taken away. Did you hear about your brother?
Some neighbors around the buildings, Gentile neighbors, were able to tell us they saw the gaudy sights. We did see some blood-stained sheets. I guess those were from the elderly people. My great-aunt was 82 years old. My grandmother was nearing 70. And but there were no bodies. My brother was seen under a lilac tree hiding when, and he was there almost the complete time, the 36 hours of the pogrom. And towards the end, somebody noticed him, and they pointed him out to the Nazis, whereupon he was grabbed and taken away. And then my uncle's wife was also seen taken away. And so we didn't know whether these two were killed. And for many years, we paid a lot of bribe. We bribed people to go to camps and towns and search those two out alive. But we never heard from them.
Now, are you talking about to go to concentration camps?
Yes, and see if they could find them there or on the way there. A lot of people said, yes, I could do it, I'll find her, just give me the money. And we paid a lot of money and never found their names.
Goisha people?
Yeah.
What were some of the camps that were near there?
The only one I heard was Auschwitz.
Oh.
Yeah, the
I
people
see.
from our town were taken to Auschwitz.
Now, you mentioned the siren. Who blew the siren to warn
The
you?
city.
It blew
Yes, it was a city siren.
You mean they blew, the city gave you that service? They blew the siren to let the Jews know there was going to be a
The
pogrom?
city, or perhaps the vehicles that the Nazis were traveling in. But I think it was a central city siren. It used to be blown at midday, or when there was a power failure, we'd hear a siren in town.
Well, the point is this, that to give you that warning was a service. I mean, they were helping you by giving you a warning. In other words, when you heard the siren, you knew that there was a pogrom?
It was more of a disparaging, doing things in a disparaging way. Jews, we're coming to get you, because there was no time to really save yourself.
I see.
And then at the end, like you tell an animal, okay, lift your head. You've been beaten long enough. If you can lift your head, go ahead, try.
I see.
That's about all.
Then what happened after that, after you came up out of the bunker?
We decided we must leave town. It was too painful. My uncle was left a widower at the early age of 30 with a baby of 1.5 years old. And there was no wife. And my mother, at that early age, lost her oldest son, who happened to be, I guess every child is something special, but this one was something special. My father tells the story. When he departed for the World's Fair, this boy was 5 years old, and he was able to learn Chumash and Rashi with him. My father remembers the way this child translated Rashi. He was tutored privately on the estate. He was an exceptional child, and my mother will never forget him. Even though she does not mention him, she doesn't believe in crying for the past, but it left a scar. She was lucky enough when she came to America in 1948. She came in 1947, but October 1948, she had a boy. She gave birth to a boy.
Thank God. Thank God for that.
That's right.
So you left. Your uncle and your mother?
We had to leave the place.
Uh-huh.
And we just didn't want to experience another pogrom in that place. But knowing that wherever we go, that's all we'll have to face, because Poland was taken by the Nazis, Austria was too, and they had made up their mind to get rid of the Jews. But yet, we took our life in our hands, paid a lot of money to some Gentile people who had a chariot. We packed our belongings and left to Zbarash. That's the town my parents were close to all the time. They had many friends, and they felt they'll go there and be amongst friends. The trip was hazardous. We were tiny kids, and it was dangerous. You didn't trust the Gentiles at that time. It didn't have to be a Nazi to strike you down. We made it. We got to Zbarash. We went to elderly gentleman who made monuments. He was a Gentile man who owned a large house, and there were a few Jewish families renting with him. Some of them were friends of my parents, and Drescher was their name. They were all adults, like 7 boys and girls in their 20s and 30s, none of them married because they weren't hopeful enough to get married in those years with Nazis all around you, not knowing when's your last day. And they took us in. As miserable a life as they had, they provided for us too. And we stood with this Gentile man. Shortly afterwards, they made a ghetto for all the Jews to move into. The Nazis did. And we had to leave this man because Gentiles and Jews were not supposed to be living together or liking each other. And sooner or later, the whistle blew. There was a bunker in the ghetto for all the Jews to run into. And when we got there, all I remember were very many people, young and old, children. And after 12 hours of being down there, the oxygen was used up and many of them died. And I do remember the Nazis banging on the floor upstairs saying, "Jew, we know you're there, open up." And they tried very hard. But that cover wasn't just the floor alone. It was at least 2 feet of cement that was pulling that floor down. So as much as they tried to yank it up, the Nazis couldn't. And we heard the whistle that the pogrom was over. We carried many bodies out, and we remained alive.
So then how long?
How long did freedom take? Perhaps 2 more weeks until the next pogrom. We lived through 5 pogroms in Zbarash, and the community was growing from hundreds to tens, and we decided you can't stay there for another pogrom because there was hardly anyone left. There was no chance of surviving. So at the end of the 5th pogrom, my parents decided to go, my uncle decided to go back to the forests of Zarivinitz and Hervitz, the forests that belonged to his family. He would know how to walk these forests at night or during the daytime and hide in them. He wouldn't be lost there. It was home grounds for him. So on Pesach, he took along a siddur, a bottle of wine, and I don't remember the matzahs because I don't think they had a chance to bake matzahs at that time. He depended on food from the Gentiles who lived on the premises of the Altstadter estate. He was going to go and face them and beg their kindness to feed them.
And so you went back to the estate. How did you go? At night when it was dark, so you couldn't be seen leaving town?
That's right, but it was a long distance, and I remember after we slept in a wooded area, I remember a deer came upon us, and that was a big scare for little kids who were just used to Nazis instead of deer. But he explained us, he said, this is an animal, and we're in the hands of Hashem now. It's much easier to be in the hands of Hashem than in the hands of human beings who are wicked.
Hashem is God.
Mm-hmm. And we slept overnight, and we continued to walk. I remember the sunrise, the flowers, the valleys, the pastures. It was all very pleasant for a 5-year-old, 4 or 5-year-old.
And how long did you hide out in those forests?
We were there for 11 months and 3 weeks.
And during that time, how did they get food? He would go with your mother at night?
Yes. We went a few hundred families, and after 11 months and 3 weeks, we came back just 2 families, because even in the forests, the Nazis had a lookout to find and track down Jews who were hiding there. And they did find very many of us. First, we went to a family who was willing to take us in. They really put their life in their hands when they did that. They put us upstairs in a coop with ducks and geese, and the 5 of us. There was no room to sit up or stand up, but to lie flat. And a few times a day they would reach up and serve bread and water. And this is how we were for a short while. And then they became very nervous after hearing of Nazis who killed Gentiles who were hiding out Jews. And they frankly said, we must leave. That was just a few days, and we left. We left. My uncle took along a shovel, and he dug bunkers in the forests, each about 30 miles away from the other, so that we are not found in one of them. Perhaps we'd stay too long and be tracked down. So we'd rotate bunkers. Some were across valleys or pastures, and some were in wooded areas, and we'd only walk from one to the other at night when it was dark.
I see. And then how did your mother and your uncle go off together to get food?
Yes, we were told to stay and wait for them until sunrise, or they'd come before sunrise, about 4 o'clock they'd be back. They had quite a distance to walk, and 2 water cans each one would carry, because we had no other water supply. In rainy seasons, we had mud puddles, but otherwise it was very essential to have enough water, and they'd carry these cans and loaves of bread, which we were rationed, just that much per day, because not always could they go back, or was it safe to walk the forests. Nazis were all around.
Bread was principally what you ate.
Bread and water.
And they would bring back bread and water.
Yes. My uncle, being an agrarian, knew foliage that wasn't poisonous. We'd eat that. We'd have nuts, some mushrooms, and some berries, too, from the forest that we were in. During the summer, when the hunting season was, he wouldn't leave us in the forests because it was too dangerous. Many Jewish families were spotted by hunters or picnickers, so that we would spend the days in wheat fields, the sunny, bright days, in wheat fields or rye fields or corn fields. We'd have to lie flat, not to move, because motion would be detected from far away, and that would spell death. We never supposed to talk or sneeze or cough, because that too would spell death for the entire family. So we were taught to just stay put, no matter if we were sunburned, 1st degree or 2nd degree, whatever the blisters looked like or how painful it was still better than being dead. So we'd be flat in those fields during the day, and at night we were given to We lost teeth. Our teeth were just decaying. My mother's teeth, too. We might have been ill. We had sores on our feet because going from one bunker to the other, passing fields when they were just harvested, we had to step on the bottom part, and that would just pierce our soles. And there was a lot of pus and a lot of pain because we had no shoes.
Now, how did you finally find out that the war was over and that you were liberated?
Oh, before this, I'd like to tell you an incident. Once when my uncle was going with my mother for bread and water, it was understood that the 3 girls would stay home or stay in the bunker and say psalms. We were taught 2 psalms of King David by heart. We didn't know how to read or write, but we knew many prayers by heart, the morning prayer, the evening prayer, and these 2 psalms, which we would say continuously. My uncle said, if you want to save your life and make sure that we get back safely, you children have to ask and pray all night. And it was hard to withstand sleep, but one would keep the other awake and say the psalms. One night we did fall asleep, and the next thing we saw were bright flashlights shining on our faces and a loud laughter with a German accent, and those were Nazis talking to my uncle and mother, saying, "Wow, we couldn't believe you're telling the truth, but it was true." And after a while my uncle came in. It was a big relief to see him instead of the Nazis, and he said simply that we were caught, we were found on our way back, they caught us, and they just wanted to check if you kids are here, and now, if you will all say Shema Yisrael, they'd like to kill us. This is the end. And we always listened to him. And as we were standing, shaking with fear, my mother especially, these Nazis said, they just kept on giggling and laughing and drinking a little too. And they said, well, it's just terrific. We wanted to kill him and her, but they didn't want these kids to die alone from starvation or suffer, so they brought us here. What should we do now? And it's true. Who could believe it? 3 little girls, and they just, with the butt of their gun, counting us back and forth. And then one of them came up with an idea. Let's give them a chance to run for their life. We'll count till 10, and let's see how far they can run. And they were standing there saying, okay, when we blow the whistle, you have a chance to run. Let's see how far you can run until 10. And they blew the whistle, and I felt a yank from my mother's hand, and we just ran for our lives. And after running, not just until 10 seconds passed, but it seemed like an eternity, and I was out of breath, my mother noticed that my uncle and his daughter must have gone to a different direction, and here she was alone with the 2 of us at her hands, all alone in the dark. And she was wondering what's worse, being killed or being left alone with 2 kids, not knowing where to go for bread or water. But we were so tired that we just collapsed and slept. And when we got up, my mother said, all of you yell loud my uncle's name, Yosef. Perhaps he'll hear, and he'll just come and get us, because we're helpless without him. And this was most probably the night that came after the day that we slept. It was at night, and we'd walk through the woods backwards where we came from, yelling Yosef. And after many hours of yelling, he answered, here I am.
Your mother and your uncle would go together because your mother said that she had to be there to protect him.
She had to be there because if he does get caught, she wouldn't be able to do it. She doesn't know the forests.
Oh.
And then, too, she helped with the water and the loaves of bread.
She helped it.
Yes.
So, now, when... how did you finally know that you were free? How did you finally know?
Yes, the family that went out with us, that was freed together at the end of 11 months and 3 weeks, that family wasn't far away. Their bunker was near our bunker. And we wouldn't get together, but for very major instances we would. And on a Saturday afternoon they knocked and we opened, and they said, did you hear? The Russians came into this town. It's time to go. It's Jubilee. But my uncle was afraid to leave so soon, knowing that the Gentiles in the area were very hateful, and they too would kill a Jew upon sight, even if the Nazi wasn't standing over him. So he said, I'm not leaving at least for another week. He said, and they insisted that he go. And he said, I insist that you stay. Well, the 2 of them, they were a family of 4. 2 of them left, and they were killed that same afternoon, Saturday afternoon. In fact, we even heard the gunshots, and we buried their bodies. But we waited for another 7 days or 8 days, and it was all quiet, and the Gentiles were subdued by the Russians. Their pride was gone. They too were in a bad shape now. The Russians weren't too kind to anyone. And we felt it's time to leave. And we just walked for days on end, never felt hungry, just very happy, until we got to Zbarash, the city that we left from.
And there you were free. You were free to walk and go back to your home?
The place was in shambles. There wasn't a building that was complete. The planes were still flying over all the time. There were bombs being thrown down.
Which planes were those?
Russian
planes.
planes,
yeah.
right. But after a while, so we were hiding in cellars, the broken houses. We recognized the house we were in before. We gathered some pots and pans and kashered them, hung a few sacks on windows or boarded the windows and doors. And but we were free to make Shabbos. We were free to be called a Jew. We didn't have to die for that reason alone. We could have died for other reasons then, had a bomb struck that building in particular, or many of the Russian soldiers were very drunk, and when they walked into a house, it wasn't safe if they would keep their hands off the gun or not on the gun. My uncle would always hide my mother, and because the soldiers weren't kind to females when they walked in, and we'd just pray that they leave the house and we'd be left alive, but we knew that we wouldn't be killed for being Jewish. And after a few just about a month or two, the school system in town started, and we were sent to school. I learned reading and writing, math, that right away. As soon as the town committee treated it as a town and not a war-struck area.
Who was the town committee? You mean the Goyim?
Russians, yes. There was no Jewish community left, just some broken souls here and there.
Now, how is it that your father wasn't able to get in touch with you immediately when the Russians, when you got back to the town? Wasn't the Red Cross or High Ace or Jewish committee somebody that could find you for him?
He tried. When we came here, he showed us evidence that he continuously tried, but those were very dangerous years and no
I know he tried,
communication.
but even after the Russians came in, so what was your first contact with with him?
My uncle found a card of his at the local post office. There were heaps of mail from all over to many Jews who used to live in the town, but there was nobody left. So we just brushed through piles and piles of mail, and we found the card with his address, and immediately we called and got in touch, and he got to work to earn enough money to send for tickets and bring us to America. And that happened pretty fast. We were in Spanish for close to 2 years.
Oh.
Yes, when the tickets were all finished and formed. And in that time, my uncle acted as the Rosh HaKohel, which is not a rabbi or a teacher, but if people wanted to get married or if there was a bris or a shochet that had to be looked up, that was his responsibility. And the income was, my mother, she was a marvelous cook, and she baked for a few local bakeries. They would give her the flour and all the ingredients, and she'd stand home and bake, and my sister and myself would deliver the rolls and breads, and she'd get paid. That was the income.
Did any Jewish relief come into the town? Any American committee?
Not in that town. In Poland, like Warsaw and Wrocław, where we went. Once we got the tickets, we had a train trip to Wrocław. There, you had a lot of Jewish relief. But thank God, my mother was always able to bring in food into the house, and we didn't want any. And we did have the tickets for America, so we didn't need any other relief.
Now, you went to Wrocław, and then where did you go after that?
We were there 3 months. I also attended, the first time I ever attended a Hebrew school was in Wrocław. They already had Hebrew schools there. And after the 3 months there, we went to Sweden, Stockholm, and from Stockholm we went by Gripsholm, that's the ship, on the Gripsholm, to New York. And in Sweden there was a lovely Jewish community, mostly those who were passing by. And there was wonderful people and a lot of hayas work done over there, but we didn't need it, so we didn't come in touch with them.
Do you know what day you landed in New York?
February 11th, 1947.
And your father was there?
He was there to pick us up, and we were told as little kids, you don't remember Daddy, but he is a man with a red beard. There was no man with a red beard, but we did spot a man with a white beard, and that was my father. Being here alone affected him more than those who came from Europe. They didn't look as bad as what he did staying here.
So what was he doing then? Where was he working?
At first he worked in New York using his diesel engineering skills, but he wanted to be self-employed and independent. And those years, 1939, 1940, a yeshiva was formed in Lakewood, New Jersey, and that was also a wonderful farming area. So he decided to follow the yeshiva and support himself on a chicken farm. Now, the Jewish Agency and other wonderful people loaned him money, and he was able to set up. And he always tells us how happy he was to pay them back, too.
I see. And then in later years, you say that he used his diesel engineering skills again. When did he study at Troy?
In Troy, Ohio? Chicken business went very bad for the small farmer in the 1950s, and he was losing money for a long time until he decided it's time to switch to something else in order to support his family. He had his, by now we were grown up, my sister, myself, in marriageable age, so he he read an ad of a Hobart School of Welding in Troy, Ohio. They're looking for students and also for representatives in the eastern part of the country. And he inquired, and he told them the background that he has from Berlin University. And they told him to come down. They were very surprised that this man with this engineer, who speaks a beautiful English without an accent, happens to have a long white beard. But instead of Chaim, they called him Charlie, and he sat in the class. And after 8 months, he got a diploma. And the manager of the school said that he'd be a wonderful person to represent the Hobart School of Welding and Hobart Welding Equipment in central and southern Jersey. They would give us the distributorship over there. This is where we live. And we took them right up and opened up a shop.
Is that what he's still doing?
Yes, it's Atlas Welding Supply in Lakewood, New Jersey.
Now, where did you go to school then in America?
My father, before we got to America in 1947 in February, he was very functional in opening a Lakewood Hebrew Day School. He knew we were coming. This was in September when the school year starts. And when we came in February, there was a group of 9 children, all ages, from kindergarten through 3rd grade in one classroom. And he really prepared this for the 3 girls, the 3 of us.
I see. And you went there through...
We went through 8th grade. And then for high school, there was no Hebrew high school in Lakewood. He sent us to Beth Jacobs School in Williamsburg, New York. After 4 years of that, I continued Hebrew for 2 years in a teacher's seminary. And in the afternoons, I went to Brooklyn College.
And you tell me that you're just ready now to complete your college education?
Yes.
What year did you get married?
Hopefully to continue in some other kind of education. 1956.
And who was the man you married? Was he American born?
When I finished seminary, I wanted to continue Brooklyn College, but my father had a call from a Hillel school in Asbury Park, New Jersey, that the school will fold up if we don't get a teacher. And there are no Hebrew teachers in the area, and they knew my father. They said she graduated seminary. It's time to put her to work. Not that my father wanted me to work, but he insisted it's a very important thing to keep a Hebrew school from closing. And he said, drop your college, drop the Brooklyn College, and come out here, live with us, and teach in that school. You'll pick up college locally. I did that. I started teaching in September. And by April the following year, the principal's wife insisted that I meet her brother. And it didn't take too long, a year and a few more months, when this brother, who was my first and last date, hopefully,
so you were
is
married?
my husband. Yeah.
What year were you married?
56.
And is your sister married?
Yes, she married before I did.
And
she's older.
And your brother, who was born, what year was he born?
In 1948, my brother was born, and he finished a day school. And for high school, this was in 1962, when he was ready for high school, my father decided that it would be a wonderful thing to educate him in Israel. And now with the freedom of going to Israel whenever you want, and my father took a plane trip to Israel, not knowing how long he'll stay there, but the fact that he had an engineering license and doing well and knowing the field thoroughly, he was approached by Ort in Israel that they have an opening for a diesel engineer to teach. And just 3 weeks after that, he was approached by Kiryat Noar, that's Boys Town in Jerusalem. They too need a vocational teacher who is an Orthodox man. That is a hard thing to come by. So he chose the Kiryat Noar job, And from his 3-week tour trip that he bought a round-trip ticket, he had to stay there. They made him feel as if they must have him, and they did, because he wound up teaching Moroccan and many Sephardic Jews, teenagers who wanted to know this vocational skill and remain religious too. They didn't want to pick it up in schools where they might lose their religion and be influenced by other types just because they wanted a vocational career. So he thought that was important enough to stay in Israel, and he brought my brother to Israel right soon after and decided he'll attend the Israeli yeshivas, which he did for about 9 years. My brother had a thorough yeshiva education. And then after that, he returned to America, my brother. He took his high school equivalency exams and passed with no hardships, and was accepted at Newark School of Engineering. That's a college and an engineering school, which he graduated from. He was very mechanically inclined. He was always near my father all his life and picked the trade up. Now he's married. He works all day. He learns in the Lakewood Yeshiva. A father of 3 girls.
He works as a diesel engineer?
Yes, at the business, the welding.
With your father.
Yes.
Did you, first of all, what kind of Hasidim did you say you were? You said a word.
Kapitchnitzer.
Does that mean you came from...
The Rebbe came from that town, and
What was the name of the town?
Kapitchnitz. And he settled in 132 Henry Street, the Rebbe did. And we always went to him.
You mean in New York?
Yes, yes.
He got. When did he come over? After the war?
During World War II, or soon after. And my father was felt as if he's a son to the Rebbe, always.
I see.
Very close.
Have you ever had any contact with the Gentiles, the kind Gentiles that helped you?
Yes, we still do send packages to them. My uncle especially, who dealt with them directly. I myself, my sister and cousin, really don't remember the people. And to us, it's always amazing to see him stand and pack packages for hours before Christmas and Easter and during vacation. And he pays hundreds of dollars postage to get a package into Russia or Poland, but he does it lovingly with a tune.
They saved your lives.
Yes. If they need it or not, he insists that they must remember that we remember them.
Did your cousin that was saved, did he, your uncle has never married again?
No.
But your cousin is a graduate of some school of dress?
Yes, she finished the teacher seminary, and she didn't like teaching, so she majored in dress designing at FIT in Manhattan. And she's a very successful dress designer. She worked for Jonathan Logan, Pacemaker, and she's very proud when she sees her fashions in the Fifth Avenue window in New York. She's very happy doing that.
And what did your sister do?
My sister managed to raise a family of 6.
Well, how much education did she have?
She had the seminary and some credits at Brooklyn College, but she taught Jewish history in a high school in Queens last year. Her youngest is 5 years old. Most probably she'll continue to teach and learn.
Where are you finishing your education? What school?
At Keene College in Newark, New Jersey.
I see. And you have, Ken and Hara, 5 boys?
5 children.
5 children.
Yes, and my oldest has just finished the Beth Jacobs Seminary, and she was in Israel. And starting this September, she's a teacher at the Plainfield Hebrew Day School, teaching Hebrew all day.
I see. Well, it's been very interesting, and
thank
you very much. Now, in 1939, your father made every effort to get back to his family, didn't you say?
Yes, he wrote to the State Department, to Rabbi Scherer, the head of the Aguda, and to many organizations, and he was told that there is no chance of getting back. Civilians do not travel safely right now. It's a war situation. He wasn't let go.
When you crossed down the Grips home, was there a kosher kitchen? How did you manage with food? Do you remember?
There must have been a kosher kitchen. There was a minyan, but for the 11 days that it took us, we were seasick all the time. The most I can get to were the swings and the children to play with, and then I'd run right back to bed.
Nice.
Perhaps some fruit. We were given fruit and vegetables. That's all I remember eating.
Since the war, have any of your family ever visited the part of Poland where you owned all that property?
My uncle was there during the year and a half that we were in Sparish. He would go and collect the skeletons with a group of other people, and we have pictures of the town people, my mother including, digging with shovels, kvarim for the dead. All the skeletons were shoved into graves so that their bodies wouldn't be left on the fields. That's what he was busy doing. He wasn't interested in reestablishing property or...
Well, now, what about reparations? They owned all that vast land. Were they not recompensed or reimbursed?
We did get letters from some German organization that we should make an account of what they owe us. And my uncle always wrote them that they can never pay him for a second that was spent in that hell, or pay him for a life that was killed, that was dear to him. But they insisted on paying, and when the check arrived, he gave that check to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. He also gave them, to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, he gave a diary that he kept during the 11 months and 3 weeks that we were in the forest. There wasn't a day that we didn't know the date and what day it was. He was very meticulous in his diary of everything that happened and keeping track and calendar, the Jewish holidays, when they were. We ate before Yom Kippur, and we fasted Yom Kippur, just as like we fasted many other days, but we knew this is Yom Kippur. He had a very carefully planned calendar.
What was your uncle's first name?
Joseph Altstadter.
Uncle was Joseph. And what's your father's first name?
I'll spell it. C-H-A-I-M.
I-M?
Mm-hmm.
Chaim.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I see. So your father didn't take any reparations money either?
No. Whatever check the German organization figured out by themselves, and we did not want to send them any kind of numbers at all. In fact, we told them we want nothing because it's impossible to pay for. He just sent that away to this wonderful place in Jerusalem. They have many records of all the Holocaust events, and my uncle quotes the part in the Bible where it says, the mitzvah to remember what Amalek has done unto you. The Amalek was chasing the Jews in the desert in Egypt, but his descendants were always chasing the Jews, and my uncle believes the Nazis are descendants of Amalek, and we always have to remember and make public the facts, the tortures that they have done unto us, and never forget them. And just to accept reparations will not help us feel any better, or not help us forget, so he just as well not take anything. But he gave that money to Yad Vashem, and they remember, and they want others to remember. So this is what it's used for.
That's this project, partially. Tell me, what were the 2 psalms that you sang to keep yourselves awake, you 3 little girls? What were they?
I can tell you their numbers.
And what were do you know the first words?
Yes, in Hebrew, I know.
Well, that's all right. Would you say?
Shir hamalos eso einai el haharim me'ayin yavo ezri.
Which means?
It's a song that David sang, and it starts, I lift my eyes to the skies, wondering where will my help come from, but I know my help is coming. It's coming from God, the one who made the heaven and earth. That's the first part of it. And the other one is Shir Hamalos Mima Makim Korasicha Hashem. David says, I call you from the depths, the bunkers, the misty dark places. I call unto God for his help.
Now this is getting a little bit personal, but did your mother and your father ever have to have any psychotherapy to help them carry on after they got to America? Did your mother ever have to have any professional help, or did she have the kind of emotional and mental strength?
Well, times of strain could either improve us or damage us, and my mother has felt that this certainly gave her more strength to live by, and all of us really felt that it strengthened us. It strengthened our love and belief in God, and that we were saved and we have a purpose in life, and we are more than lucky to live every day and live the purpose that we should be living for. That's where we take it. But my uncle, who has never remarried, he has never taken a job on his own. He's worked with my father, alongside my father. He lives with my parents. He really never built a life of his own. Perhaps it's because life really, the only reason for living is just to thank God, not to accumulate wealth or property. He just wouldn't waste any time for that anymore. He really spends day and night studying and teaching the Torah.
I see.
Sparish.
Yes.
When we got back to it, we found Sidurim and Chumashim Bibles inscribed with the Altstadter name, and we found some dishes that we left before we went to the forests, and we found pictures that were bound up in a very dirty sack, but they were there. Nobody needed pictures, they just left them there. And we have very many family pictures. It's a heartbreak. My parents can't look through them because everyone has been killed and tortured on those pictures. Even the older people didn't get a chance to die. But I made an album for myself. I made negatives of these old pictures, those that looked good, and I gave one to my brother and sister because to me it's my family tree.
I see. The house was looted of everything else, of silver and
Yes.
any other things.
Yes, but my uncle had, we now have some of the old Sidurim that still belong to the Altstatters. That was left in Sparish at this house.
When you were in these, on the estate, did you have, was it in those two little villages that you said were on the farm, on the estate, did you have teachers come from the big cities to teach you, or did you go there for shul?
The teachers came to the estate, and they would live there. My mother is a pianist of 13 years as a little girl, and then she continued after she got married. And the teacher, I don't know who knew more, my mother or the teacher, but she would live there and teach her music. Then there were teachers of English. My parents know Dickens and Shakespeare. They knew it in English before I got to learn it here in the local schools.
But the point is that you were too far from the main to the large city, the closest city. Yes.
This is the life they picked for themselves. They wanted to be large landowners and live away from it all.
So your teachers had to come from the big cities and stay with you in your home.
Yes.
Your Hebrew teachers, everybody. And then your shul was just the people that lived on the estate, your minyanim for Shabbos and Yantif.
Yes, yes. It was a large minyan. Friday night, the story goes, there were very many people at the Shabbos table. And there were cooks, of course, who cooked for everyone. But it was a big crowd.
And the services were in your home?
Yes. Just a point about my grandmother, whose name was Mita. During World War I, my father and my uncle, who were at the age of 9 to 14,